Okay, so yeah, let's move on now to a little Bill Gates, David.
Our favorite boy,
Uh,
Sweet
j-
Bill.
just fucking talks and talks. This guy. You know,
Matt, did you know he reads a book every day?
yeah, okay. That's interesting. Yeah, him and Ty Lopez, the Ty
Yeah.
Lopez book club.
Dude, I want that alternative universe where it's just Bill Gates just being like, hello, these are all of my books. I care about them much more than my Lamborghinis.
So Bill Gates, David has some other shenanigans he's done, but he was interviewed with by Wired magazine, who should know better, but having covered him as an antitrust or scofflaw in
Yeah.
the '90s, um, he has this. He's talking about Marx, okay, and that's the issue. So we're gonna address it. Here he is. Let me just make this a little bit bigger so I can read it. And he's talking about the Green New Deal. So it's not as other subjects like owning all the farms or African population growth rates. He's on to the other thing, which is, I mean, I guess kind of related in his mind to those, which is climate change. So here's a question posed to him by Wired. Um, uh, do you think a giant political investment in the 2016 election that might have resulted in a different outcome would have helped the climate more than any of the things in your book? Now, look, I don't want to overstate Hillary Clinton's record on what she would have done on climate had she been in office, but I do want to say that I I she's not a Marxist. So here's Bill Gates's response. No, go look at my 2010 climate talk, which I didn't do. I'm not going to do. I say I would rather have energy innovation than the right to pick every president for the rest of my life. Now I have to admit, which is like how this guy thinks about things, right? Like, if I can only do one,
No.
which I'll probably do both. I didn't anticipate that the electorate would pick Trump. So it's made me think twice. That's not for climate reasons. Competence really matters. Look, this country needs changes of party. You can't just have Democrats in charge. It's not going to happen. And it's not good for the country. The
Oh,
Democrats,
so this is just like like stupid reasoning. You need
yeah,
balance. Oh my
exactly.
God.
This is an eagle with needs of both a left and a right wing to fly bullshit. The Democrats do not think resources are finite. Okay. Um, he says resources are finite. I'm enough of a centrist to look at the Green New Deal and say, what world do you people live in that you're going to give everyone a job and you stuck that in a climate bill? You must not be serious about climate. You must be singing the theme song of the Internationale and reading Marx. Do you
That'd be a
want
good thing.
Yeah, do you want that party to be in charge forever? No, not me. So like just complete fucking blather, right?
Well,
Like
certainly. But he's so funny because he's such like the media darling of every boring like centrist liberal, right? And he's straight up doing like boomer conservative dad shit right there, saying like essentially saying that like the Democratic Party is like representative of like Marxism today.
just insane. Yeah. So I'm glad that he is going to allow the political system to stay competitive. It's nice of him. Just deciding. It gave me a second thought. Maybe I should just swing all these elections on my own. Uh, and
Which
and
he
we,
can do.
which is yeah, exactly, and this is fundamentally the point, which is he should not have this ability because he was the most adept sociopath in a criminally monopolizing industry, to the point where fucking the Clinton administration is like, you are consolidating too much,
Hmm.
like, and doing so in ways that like you would be like hostile mergers, where you're stealing IP and like the lawyers will sort that shit out. This guy is a fucking pirate, and not in like the righteous way of like sharing shit illegally. He was just taking stuff and capitalizing on it. That's why
Hmm.
that's where this capital came from. It didn't come from like him coding Windows himself. I feel like if you look up the actual thing that Bill Gates has coded, it's laughable. Like
Yeah.
he's just
No, he understood patents and IP.
right. Thank God. I mean, super useful things.
Well, useful, and there's a reason that he's very worried about government policy, because he's another one of these characters. We talk about Elon Musk, but like people don't realize how much of a role the United States, especially through like their soft power organizations like the IMF and World Bank, like imposes IP on the rest of the globe, right? Intellectual property.
Mhm.
It is not something that has actually developed in many other societies, but the United States, like, y'all have to do this shit if you want to trade with the largest economy in the globe, right? So, in that sense, like, Bill Gates is just as much of like a glorified government
Yes.
project as anybody else.
Yeah. And like that's the thing is like you got to start thinking of corporate state as just the privatized version of the state. Like this is all like I mean maybe that theoretically I'm not getting that right, but like these are
Yeah.
it's the same fucking thing basically. And he is he's just basically an unaccountable bureaucrat.
And his climate book is shit. Um, it's like second rate solutions to these massive problems, and I want to get to a great piece that Grace Blakely wrote about it in just a second, but can we go for one moment? I put in the chat, Matt.
Mhm.
Oh, you have it already, the agriculture,
Yep.
because one of our early segment on this show, Left Reckoning, we talked about Bill Gates, who's penchant for buying a shitload of farmland. And now he is now this super nerdy guy is supposedly also the biggest farmer in the United States. He owns more farmland than anybody else. And let's get to the part of it where somebody asked him in a Reddit AMA. God, this is a very important segment, but like there's so much about this six sauce thing. No hate to Reddit. I mean, I use it, but it's just like the concept of Bill Gates like just hanging out. They're actually
Hello, fellow internet users.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So responding to the question, hey Bill, why are you buying so much farmland? Uh, Gates indicated that seed science and biofuel development were major drivers of the acquisitions. My investment group chose to do this. It is not connected to climate.
Wow.
The agriculture sector is important. With more productive seeds, we can avoid deforestation and help Africa deal with the climate difficulty they already face. It is unclear how cheap biofuels can be, but if they are cheap, it can solve the aviation and truck emissions, right? Incredible. I will say that folks should check out citations needed for a very good breakdown of how insane Bill Gates's charities are in Africa. I will say just kind of general criticism. People like you oftentimes will use like the philanthropic efforts of folks like Bill Gates or Mark Cuban or Elon Musk or whatever as like a defense for what, or Mark Zuckerberg is better. I don't even know if Elon Musk really pumps any big charities.
Him and Bezos
He's
kind
too
of
busy.
don't.
He thinks that him getting money is a benefit to humanity in general. Is what he said the other day on Twitter.
And they think that their Mars shit is like the biggest gift to humanity they could ever do. So,
But honestly, I'd prefer that to this shit in a way, because what's really annoying with these people who do a lot of charity work, essentially what they're doing is they are buying up huge parts of like social action to deal with social problems, right? So it's not that Bill Gates is just, oh, I'm giving money to people to help him out. He is saying, you need to do this kind of plan to deal with this problem.
yes.
It's a control issue across the board. You might say, oh, maybe it helps folks out. One, again, people should listen to Citations Needed piece on this, because they really break down how Bill Gates is like, not only is he like a nerd, but he's somebody who just gets caught up in these insane ideas that don't help folks, right? Like his like one net policy, for example, where he's pushing nets into all of these communities to fight malaria. Well, those typically were ending up being used to fish because people needed food, right? And it's not again saying that we shouldn't be providing and helping out folks as much as possible. It's making this very clear point that a lot of these other problems fundamental roots are in capitalism and hyper-exploitation and imperialism, which are systems that Bill Gates very clearly supports, as you can see from his comments on Marx and the Internationale when we're talking about giving people a job in the United States, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The second thing is, it's amazing.
Can I just, before you get to the second thing, I just talk about his failures. He also, per the Rand Foundation, who was invited by the Gates Foundation to audit what they have been doing in education, trying to overhaul the entire fucking education system of this country, again, because he was a fucking pirate in the 90s. He used to do this. And the Rand Foundation says, oh, that was a massive failure. The charter school bullshit, basically, right? And like give kids iPads. And turns out, and in high stakes testing, I guess, top line, and failed. Absolutely failed. And it's just like, oh, well, whoops. I guess we just wasted all those students' time, and all that money that we shouldn't have stewardship over should be democratically allocated. And yeah, I mean, he's just a bad man. I don't like Bill Gates.
No, and he sucks. And him talking about, it's very, I mean, at least he was honest saying that like he's buying up farmland because his investors are telling him to take control of as much as possible in this country. Amazing thing to just let slip out, I have to say.
Insane. Which is like, talk about a country that supposedly inculcated against the idea of central planning to the point, right, where we have to like kind of rehabilitate certain elements of it. But this is central planning by freaks, and we just get a glimpse of what exactly purpose they're doing it for. They're buying up all the farmland, and we don't know why. We can just guess. We guess maybe it's climate change. No, I guess. And Bill Gates is like, yeah, it's not related to climate. Man, it is truly dystopian. That this is freedom for people. That this fucking system is freedom. How many people's livelihoods are they sitting on trying to like game the future seed market? Right?
Yeah.
Like just the of like sustenance for a year that shit could be paying for.
I mean, this is something that you should be very worried about. This is our food system, right? These are critical decisions that should be democratically controlled and debated and understood. Instead, we're going to let private individuals make massive decisions about our food system and about our environment. It is a disaster waiting to happen. Or it's also something I just don't want to fucking live through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we pull up this Grace Blakely piece, because I think this is a really good point that she makes. I'm sorry, if you could just control F to the destruction of nature. She makes this really good point in the piece where she's talking about like, oh well, Bill Gates, even though he's going to make his whole speech about like Marx and Marxism, he's saying that he thinks the state should support some activities, right? And it's this kind of fake dichotomy she lays out that like liberals and conservatives have when they talk about the climate question, right? Which is like liberals say like the state should get involved, and then conservatives are saying no, the market should decide, right? And when we interviewed Grace, we talked about this, and this is a great point that Panish makes, and it's a Marxist understanding of these questions, that this whole dichotomy, more government versus the market, right? Like government versus the market, is an insane and incorrect category. Honestly, just like when you talk to a libertarian, it's the same kind of thing. Like they treat these things as if they are separate. It's like, no, the state functions in a capital society to maintain the long-term interests of the market, right? Or of capitalists. And the market cannot exist without the state underlying it and securing it. So anyways, that's the argument that Grace makes earlier. And she says that, so all this stuff that we're getting from Bill Gates is BS boat, like, it's time for more state intervention. It's not saying that we shouldn't do more. It's saying like this kind of question of like state or market is not the way to think about it. And let me just read from this text. The destruction of nature is part of the nature of capitalism, the central logic of which is endless accumulation. Even if solving climate breakdown would ultimately promote the interests of the capitalist class as a whole, any intervention large enough to solve the problem, which doesn't include solutions that allow half the planet to be submerged by rising sea levels or desertified by rising temperatures would disrupt accumulation too deeply to be entertained. The capitalist state is supposed to solve this challenge by encouraging or forcing firms to take difficult actions in the short term that will nevertheless promote their interests over the long term. But the state is also structurally constrained by the nature of the capital system. Governments rely on capital accumulation to sustain both their legitimacy among the general public and their valuable links with private interests. Finding our way out of this cul-de-sac requires building power outside of these institutions in order to shape what happens within them. The only real counterweight to the power of owners of capital is the power of organized labor, and the only real counterweight to the power of the capitalist state is the organized power of the majority of the people, right? And that's it. Like, there is not going to be a capitalist Bill Gates run solution to climate change, as much as they're going to try to sell it to us, because that engine that has made Bill Gates a very rich and powerful person is reliant on hyper extraction and turning the world into a commodity to be consumed and sold, right? These things are just not compatible. And we need to push back against all of this nonsense that we're seeing. One, on the question of the climate catastrophe, preventing that, but also, as honestly, just a basic question of democracy. We should not be living in a society where some dumbass who's doing his own research, right, is being able to dictate policy. Like, that's an insane prospect. Like, drop even the socialist, criticism of capitalism. Is that a prospect that you, as a member of a supposedly democratic society, wants to live in, where some person, just because they accumulated a lot of money in, making computers or whatever, is now going to say, oh, this is the policies that we're going to pursue to make sure that the planet doesn't burn down?
He's a liability for the issue, honestly. Yeah. He's a liability for climate. That this problem is being spearheaded by this freak. Like, honestly, he's a downgrade from Al Gore. Yeah. Which is saying something. And like, this is the shit to get worked up about Bill Gates about too. Like, Bill Gates is so funny whenever we do anything about him. It's interesting to see the people come out of the woodwork, because there's so many wild conspiracy theories about him. And it's like, you don't need conspiracy theories. Like, just look at what he actually is doing. That's a problem. Like, drop all this wild, stuff that you start to see propagated on Facebook memes or whatever, and like, actually look at what rich people do and understand that it's not happening because there's some secret group of rich people getting together trying to destroy you, and understand, no, it's actually the interests of the wealthy and the elite are contradictory to your interests as a normal working person on the planet Earth, right? Like, that's the kind of understanding that you need to have, and we kind of see. Well, I just like elaborating on where that lies. Which, like, if you need to serve a capitalist, like, they like that. The more that you need to serve them for your sustenance, the better they are. So, like, it's all these stories everyone's familiar with. If the average American doesn't have $400 in an emergency, if I'm a capitalist, I'm like, yes. Like, that means I'll have all sorts of applications. There'll be people bending over backwards, and if they don't put up, I'll be able to replace them easily. Anyways, let's move to Montana.
Oh, wait, we gotta say it though, because this is the segment. So Bill Gates is the bum steer of the week, baby.
Oh yeah, bum steer of the week. We need
something for that.
You know what we need? I need to get Grant, who did the logo, to make like a cow, like a steer, steering a ship into like
insane.
Like, for instance, the side of the Suez Canal.
I love that.